Welcome to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. My name's Anwen Bottois, I'm your host, and I'm also the founder of Purple Sky Consulting. My business is all about helping leaders to be their very best, helping all leaders as much as possible to love leading. I think we can do that by helping leaders to feel more confident and feel more effective at what they do so that they actually want to do more of it. Each of the episodes from this podcast is all aimed at helping you as a leader or the leaders that you work with to feel more confident and to be more effective in what they do. I talk to experts from all kinds of areas, all kinds of topics and subjects, and hopefully they're the topics that are most useful for you as a leader. In this episode, I'm talking to Mike Leaman, the classroom exit coach. This is a really interesting discussion. And it doesn't focus just on teaching. We're talking more broadly around the things that you might want to think about when it comes to changing career, having a career change, deciding if you want to have a career change. So I hope you find this conversation with Mike really valuable. I'd love to hear what you think after you've heard it. Let's get started. Hi, Mike. It's really lovely to have you with us today. Why don't you start by doing us a little introduction into who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Hi, I'm Mike. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast. I am the founder of Classroom Exit Coach. I help school teachers and leaders transition into new careers and start their own businesses. It's something that's I'm really passionate about. Being an ex-teacher myself, someone who left the classroom and sort of went into different opportunities, and yeah, that's kind of what I do and how I help people, and it's really exciting to share those insights with you today.
Lovely, thank you. So Mike and I have had conversations before, and I've shared with him that my mum was a teacher, so I'm hoping she's not listening to this, so I don't say anything that I'm not meant to. But it's quite an interesting and challenging profession to be part of, and we're certainly going to touch on that, but we're also going to be looking at some of these themes kind of more broadly in terms of what career changing might feel like, or the things to talk about. So and think about when you might be considering changing career. So looking forward to getting into our conversation. So as you might know, and most of our listeners do already, we love a little bit of travel tip or favourite holiday destinations. So tell us a little bit about where you like to go on holiday.
I think this was probably one of the hardest questions to think about when we were when we spoke about what we were going to talk about. I really struggled with this one. One of the reasons for that is when I was a school leader, one of the things I was responsible for was school trips.
Were
So
you?
so I've led or been involved with about 550 school trips.
Pardon?
Um,
Is that even possible?
yeah.
That's insane.
So I've been all over the world.
Oh,
I've been very,
fantastic.
very lucky, very fortunate. That was one of the positive parts about the job.
Mm.
And that was amazing. But actually, although I've been sort of internationally and done all these different things, my favorite kind of place I always end up going back to is the Lake District. I absolutely love the Lake District. If anybody knows me on LinkedIn, a lot of my photos or my content is of me in the Lake District. It's kind of like my happy place. I like it because it's very wholesome. It's very still. It's very quiet. It's very peaceful. It just feels very serene. I do my best work there. I find it fires up my creativity. It's also a real kind of family destination. It's great for my daughter who's very young. It's great in terms of going on walks. It's great for the dog. And it's just so beautiful. It's just so I'd absolutely, although I love traveling around the world, I think sometimes we've got to remember the things that are on our doorstep are just as beautiful.
Totally. And you're not the first person to give the UK a shout. We're probably now the Maldives was leading the way to start with in terms of number of shout outs, but I think the UK might have gone past that now in terms of shout outs because, yeah, I mean, the lakes is lovely, isn't it? I think it was the first place we went on, like when we were allowed out on our holidays after COVID's
Yeah.
lockdowns were being lifted. And yeah, we went to the lakes, and there's just something about the air there, isn't it? It's like it's cold but fresh and clean, and yeah, it's beautiful. Good choice.
Yeah, it just does something to me, sort of spiritually when I'm driving up there. Just
Mm.
as you start to go over those hills and come down, and it's particularly sort of around the sort of Ambleside, Rydal, Grasmere area that I
Yes,
know
we were in
particularly well.
Rydal. Yeah,
It's just so beautiful.
it's gorgeous around there.
It's like a sort of
And
reset for me. It's
it
great.
is a reset. I guess the important question when you're doing that route up there is, how do we feel about tea-based services?
I'm not sure I've stopped at the TV service.
No, are you kidding me? Right, that's clearly because you're not northern enough, Mike,
Oh,
quite honestly.
maybe I've stopped there and I just haven't noticed.
It
Or
has the
yeah,
most amazing farm shop as part of the
okay.
services. So next time, T-Bay services stop for you.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
There
Well,
we
as of
go.
time of recording, I'm going up there again in about 4 weeks' time.
Well, there you
So,
go.
there we
I
go.
would like a report, please, from T-Bay services in
I'll just
terms of how
add
you
that to the
find it.
itinerary now.
Perfect. Love it. Fantastic. So thank you for sharing that with us. Let's dive into leadership a little bit now. So you've obviously shared with us that you've left the classroom now, that you were in teaching. Tell us a little bit about your leadership experience and what you learned about yourself from that leadership experience.
Yeah, I did a variety of school leader roles, really. For the majority of my career, I climbed the ladder quite quickly. It was only 1 year in my entire teaching career that I say, just the teacher,
Yeah.
but that was my only responsibility was teaching. That was only for 1 year. Within a year of being in the profession, I had several different whole school responsibilities. So I spoke about things like, you know, running school trips. I did that for 7 years. That was a thing across the school. I led on our disadvantaged provision, so working with disadvantaged families and students across the school. Very quickly, my background was as a history teacher. I became the head of the history department and the head of humanities department. I've ran a sixth form before, so I was in charge of a sixth form centre with about 200 students doing their A levels. I've done several assistant headships, which is basically sort of third in line to the. I was going to say the throne then, but that sounds really weird. Third in line to the
I
sort
mean,
of
in schools, it does feel like that sometimes, though,
it
doesn't
does a
it?
bit. It is a bit medieval and brutal sometimes. But the job I did for the majority towards the end was deputy head. So I was
Okay.
second in charge of a large secondary
Mm.
school, high performing secondary school, 1,000 students. It was in the top
Okay.
8% of sort of Ofsted rankings. Good results. And yeah, so I've had a lot of different leadership experiences, both with kind of small teams, whether it be kind of 3 or 4 history teachers, or whether it be 100+ staff as a deputy, and those are staff groups that are teaching staff, admin staff, exams officers, exam invigilators, site teams, So I've done a lot of different leadership roles in my kind of capacity in my career. I guess the thing that it sort of taught me through all of those different jobs, and I'm sure people have said this before, but connection and relationships is the absolute heart of
Yeah.
any job. You don't need to be a technical expert on what they're doing day to day, but you do need to know who your people are and what makes them tick and what motivates them and a little bit about their background and also to do with their family life, I found as well, and who they are as people and why they do the job they do. I think that relationship building for me, no matter what job it um, is the most important aspect of successful leadership. And I think if on the flip side, in terms of kind of leaders I've seen in the past who haven't been as successful as perhaps they would have liked to have been, their downfall has often been that they didn't take enough time to sort of really work with and sort of forge a team mentality and a culture that they wanted. They sort of jumped straight on in with a list of jobs without really doing the groundwork, doing the foundations to how to create the
Yeah.
conditions for success, if you like.
It's such an important point. It's one of those things that it's like that's where people need to focus their time. Like, actually, if that's all you did all day, you're gonna succeed. It doesn't matter, like, because it's all linked to the relationships you have with your people. Like, if you're doing the work, something's going wrong. But if you're building the team and you're building the relationships, you're on the right path. But I think sometimes people don't realize that, and we don't help them enough understand that that is the fundamental of getting into the right place as a leader.
Yeah, definitely. And as a school leader in particular, it's
Mm.
such a busy job.
Yeah.
It really is all consuming. And for many of your listeners, perhaps, you kind of know a little bit about school leadership, because from your own experience at school and you probably remember the sort of, the variety of things they were doing, from standing in the playground to running assemblies, from greeting people on the gate to parents' evenings. But it really is very, very, very busy. I mean, my weeks as a deputy would normally be about an 80-hour working week. So if you've got that mindset that teachers only work 9 till 3, I can absolutely assure you that's not the case. And I would often get about 1,000 emails a week. Those were emails that I had to do something with. So it's a very, very, very busy job, and that comes back to that people thing, which is it's really easy to get lost in being busy with the admin and the stuff in your office and hide away. But the most important bit you have to carve out time for, which is the visibility. It's the getting out there. It's the talking to people. It's the what's happening on the ground. What is the reality, rather than kind of what you think the reality is based on what you're seeing over your emails.
Yeah,
I think that perception versus
absolutely.
reality is really important in leadership.
And it's quite interesting, isn't it? If I hadn't thought about this before, but that dynamic of kind of your customer or the
Mm,
student, no, however you want to frame that, that's their first experience of others leading other
mm,
than their parents, isn't it? In terms
mm,
of the experience that these people create for the learning, for the environment that students are in. And I think about some of my teachers that had a hugely transformational impact on me, both positive and negative. There were
mm.
definitely impacts there. And that applies then when you go into a working environment, doesn't it? That kind of you're either shaped positively or negatively often by the people who are your managers, your leaders.
Mm. Oh yeah, I think teachers have a fundamental role in shaping who we are. We spend a huge amount of time with them, and often from a very early age as well.
Yeah.
And their attitudes, their values, the way they run the classroom, um, alters how you perceive the purpose of education, and kind of just everything to do with how you value teamwork or independence, or what kind of environment works best for you. And yeah, definitely, I think it is a first real experience of the world of work, if you like, and kind of what leadership looks like. Even though it's education, there's a different purpose to it, but it's what we often refer to in school as like the hidden curriculum. You've got the formal curriculum, which is you're learning a set of knowledge and skills and things like that, and you're working towards qualifications. But then it's the things that underpin that. It's timekeeping, it's organization, it's kind of what are the social norms about interacting with other people. And the person leading that experience is putting their values onto you. So yeah, 100% agree with you. Yeah.
Really. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about why you decided to leave teaching, and what is it that you've noticed about that and the work you've been doing with your clients as the reason people look to leave such a core profession, I guess?
Yeah, it's a really important question. Starting with sort of me, first of all, it was, you know, I'd always thought I wanted to be a teacher. I did a history degree to be a history teacher. I was really passionate about that, and that was something that, I deeply cared about. And I still deeply care about education. I worry about the state of our education system in this country, and I hear a lot of horror stories, as you can imagine, about schools and working environments. And that being said, there are some fantastic schools out there. There are some fantastic school leaders, and there are thousands and thousands of amazing teachers. But the working environment for teachers across the country is really, really tough. It's incredibly challenging. So for your listeners, a little bit of an insight into that. 40,000 teachers leave the profession every single year in the UK. That's 110 every single day, 110 every day walk away, for reasons other than retirement. So that's about 10% of the workforce, which is a huge amount of turnover. And the career average now is about 5 years. So if you qualify and you do more than 5 years, you're kind of beating the statistics. Common reasons, and the government have done a huge. There's loads of reports on this. So and they know the data, but to share a little bit. So of those people leaving, 80% cite workload as a major reason. 74% cite well-being, and there's a whole long list. The things that people see in the media are actually way down the bottom. So things like pay,
Yeah.
not even in the top 10 for reasons why teachers leave. It is what's the environment's like, what the workload is like, because the school is only open for 32.5 hours a week, but the average teacher does close to 60 hours. So it's the work that happens before school, that happens after school, that happens in the holidays, in the weekends. It's hard to describe how all-consuming the job is. Every single year you're asked to do more with less. Budgets are constantly being cut. And I saw that all the time as a school leader. We were always being told to do more. And those things were important things, more on mental health, more on community outreach. We need to do more on technological education like AI. Those are all great things. Of course, we need to do more on those. But with what resources? There was nothing left to do any of that. There's only so many ways. And particularly the buildings and the resources we had existing weren't even though they were in a good place. I had to once close the school down because our plumbing failed. We couldn't flush the toilets.
What?
And yet at a government level they're talking about let's do more on AI. Great, we don't even have plumbing.
Yeah.
All of that, and a whole load. I could list 30 reasons why I left the profession, but the key factors that I think influence me and also are the key factors that influence career change in general. It's when you're overloaded, and that impacts your stress levels and your well-being, and you get to that stage of burnout, which I was very much in. Which, to describe it in a bit more detail, is like when you start to lose your identity, your job becomes so entwined with who you are and your sense of worth that it becomes very difficult to pull those things apart. And it's easy to get in a cycle there where you're just working more and more and more and more and more, and then you sort of lose yourself even more. So being overloaded, I think linked to that is being undervalued. So the teaching profession is largely undervalued for the amazing work it does. But if you're in an environment where you just generally feel undervalued for your skill set, then of course you're going to start to look elsewhere, and being unsupported. And I think particularly that's around career development. If you're somebody who's kind of feels a bit stuck in your current position, then as a manager, you shouldn't be surprised. It's only going to be a matter of time before that person starts to look elsewhere, whether it be a different organization or a rival organization or something different entirely, because they're not going anywhere. You can't expect them to stay where they are forever. The common thing that links all of those things together, I've already said it, which is working conditions and culture. That's the number one reason why people leave. It's how they feel about work, how are they supported at work, and how much are they being asked to do, and how much of that is beyond their job description. Those kind of things are the reasons people leave, I think, or change career.
I recognise a lot of that from either my mum, who's in teaching for 20 years, in terms of the teaching side of things, but also kind of lots of colleagues that have either moved out of different careers as well. And you often find that it is, and I don't know whether I was at burnout. I've been at burnout at different points in my career, and it's definitely resulted in me making different decisions. I've stayed within HR. And then there was that point around COVID where it was a real big decision to go, no, I'm changing what I do and how I do that. What would you say are the things that maybe people should be taking into consideration when they're maybe at a point where they're feeling career change is the right option for them? What would you be thinking about there?
I think some of the first sort of things I do with clients and people who are interested in career change is it's really started to, before we start looking at jobs and before we start thinking about LinkedIn and CVs and all those kind of things, all of that practical support can come. But you need to take a big step back and think about your kind of strategy, really. And that starts with really doing a bit of self-assessment on, what you want more of and what you want less of, and what are your skills and values. So really starting to kind of understand yourself a bit more, and that can be really difficult if you're in a place of burnout or you feel absolutely pushed to your limit, which is why getting support from someone else to bounce those ideas and talk that through can be really, really, really useful. But it's those things of what are your push factors, basically? What's pushing you to leave? What are the major reasons? And for me, if you follow me on LinkedIn or if you've seen posts on LinkedIn, I post about that a lot, and I've even got my thing right here, in front of me, which is the things I'm ready. I wrote it down as the things I'm ready to let go of.
Yeah.
And I wrote this as I was starting to leave teaching. I wrote down all the things that I wanted basically to get rid of in my life, all the
Yeah.
things that were causing me unhappiness or stress to do with work. And that's been my driving force for change. And that's why it's still stuck in front of me. Because I think
Yeah.
even in my bad days of doing this job right now, I look at that and I go, at least it's not that. You know, because my problems are really trivial now. You know, there might be someone turns up late, 10 minutes late for a Zoom meeting. And I think, oh, that's annoying, but it's not,
It's
you
not
know,
that.
X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
of, you know, all the reasons what I've written down. And then you start to think of, if that's what you want less of, what do you want more of? And that can be a reflection of that list. You know, it's the opposite, but you're really starting to get into that positive. You're reframing those negative things into positive things. So if a negative thing was you're not seeing your family enough, then a positive thing might be thinking, I want more time to be at home. Okay, so let's dig into that. What kind of environment do you want? Are you looking more for a hybrid job or those kind of things? Then it's about skills and values and the working environment. You know, so I work with a lot of people who've gone into teaching, not because of the money, you know, but because they want to make a social impact. And then we start thinking, is that something you still want to do more of? Do you want to work in a place that has social impact? Or do you feel like you've done your bit, which is absolutely fine if you feel that way? And are you ready to now go into a career where it is a bit more focused on corporate kind of, you know, pay progression and sort of
Yeah.
really going for it? Maybe there's a bonus structure, those kind of things. And if that's the case, that helps us to think about that strategy of what that job might look like,
Yeah.
rather than sort of jumping in and just sort of scrolling through Indeed or Monster or whatever it happens to be, you know, and just sort of looking through those jobs, looking for the, you know, oh, there'll be something that speaks to me. Yeah, there might be, and you might find your job like that. But in my experience, the most successful career changes happen when you take a big step
Yeah.
back and you do that self-evaluation work before you even start. And the good thing is you can do that without while you're still doing your job. You don't actually need to leave your job to figure out what your next job might look like.
Absolutely. I really love the way you frame that in terms of the push and the pull.
Hmm.
Um, because it's okay to want to not have stuff and to be drawn to other things, you know, that, but understanding what those are and
Hmm.
what's actually important. You know, from leaving my corporate job, and then I went into higher education. Or did I miss my bonus structure?
I bet.
Oh, I did. I loved it. But also, you know, I had a different work-life balance,
Hmm.
and it was a, you know, there were changes there. And then when I went to work for myself, did I miss the regular pay that I knew was exactly the same amount and my pension was growing? Of course I do. But it wasn't fulfilling me in a way that my work does now. And that was a pull factor,
Mhm.
just as much as it was a push away from not wanting to work in a traditional way anymore. And that made decisions a lot easier once
Hmm.
those ideas kind of clicked for me. So I love that look at, you know, how do you make sure you've got a really good understanding of what you don't want and therefore can move away from, but also what will really light your fire and help you feel joy whenever you're going into doing the work that you're doing. And I think that's really valuable. So, what stops people making those choices?
I honestly believe the biggest thing that holds people back is fear, really. It's confidence. You know, it's I talk to a lot of people who say to me, you know, oh, I've seen this job. I didn't apply for it, but I've seen this job. It really excites me. You know, it spoke to me. I thought it'd be really good. And I sort of say, well, why didn't you apply? Oh, well, I don't think I'm qualified for it. You know, why would they want me? It's like, well, you have a 0% chance of getting that job if you don't apply. You
Absolutely.
know, you'll never have that job. Whereas the simple act of applying, you are making one step towards it. You know, you may get a rejection, you may not get an interview. That's absolutely fine. But as a mindset thing, you have told yourself that it is possible to get that job. You
Yeah.
know, and you are taking a small step towards it, and you are therefore going through kind of the practical things of getting your CV ready and sort of thinking about the company or whatever it happens to be. Um, but that fear and confidence, those self-limiting beliefs about what I can and can't do, just because you've told yourself that,
Yeah.
you know, in my experience, there's a lot of people who go, well, I've just been a teacher, I've only been a teacher, how on earth could I do this program manager job in a charity, for example? You know, you think, why do you think that? Just because it uses slightly different language to what you're familiar with. But if they were looking at the language that we use, they'd be just as confused, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is more about a sort of translation,
Mm.
rather than a missing skills,
Yeah.
you know. And often people think career change has to be starting from step one again. Go back to university. Oh, I can't take a break out. I've got family. I've got bills to pay. It doesn't need to be. It can be if you want it to be. If you've got something, you've got a dream, and you absolutely
Yeah.
I've got people occasionally who want to go into like things like midwifery. Great, you're gonna have to go and train again.
Yeah.
It would be
Yeah.
irresponsible of me.
Please go and train again. Yes.
Yeah, please go train. That would be very beneficial to all of us. But there are those specific examples.
Yeah.
But then it's thinking about, well, what could there be? Could there be a stepping stone towards that career that allows you to get out of the place that makes you really unhappy,
Yeah.
and then work towards the thing that you really want? So it could be that's a longer term strategy. How do we figure out if that's what you really want? Let's take a step towards a job that's slightly closer, maybe something in the NHS or something like that,
Yeah.
that allows you to figure out, is that actually what you want, before making that big step towards it. That could be one strategy. But I think sometimes people convince themselves that it's just not possible for them for a variety of those reasons, and it's unpicking those reasons together that I think is the key, really, to sort of making those first steps.
Yeah. It was really interesting, actually, that point that you were making around the traditional way of work and how we've got used to that. Like, my dad's 100% supportive of what I'm doing, but he doesn't understand why on earth I would want to not have a normal job or the same job. And he comes from a world where he had the same job pretty much his whole career. And even before I stepped off career, I was probably in my 7th or 8th job in 20 years, kind of thing. And that was just, to him, mind-blowing, completely mind-blowing. But there's a danger sometimes if we're holding on to something just because we feel that is the norm and what we should have. If it's not helping us actually be happy or satisfied in our life, is that the right thing to be doing?
Yeah, definitely. And there can be bits about your job that you still love.
Yeah.
Leaving something doesn't mean that you set it on fire and you walk away and you go like, I hate every aspect of it. There are bits about education I absolutely loved. There were bits about teaching that I miss, and I genuinely, I wake up sometimes and I go, I wish I could do that again.
Yeah.
There were bit, but I've got to remember that there were a list of 100 things that were pushing me out. And like you said, thinking in a non-traditional way, like my parents are very similar. They, did the same jobs for their entire career. That's a generational shift that has happened very, very quickly in our society now. But it is completely normal to change career. Genuinely, the statistic is about 2 million people every year in Britain change career. It should be more openly spoke about. And I think there's two sides to that. One, as employees, we should be more open to kind of thinking about what else could we do and how can we shift. But employers also need to be better at, in terms of embracing people from other careers, because you get a very different set of values, you get a different perspective, you get somebody who's bringing a new skill set into your world of work. I'm not saying hire somebody completely random. Of course, you've got to think about it. But do think about what somebody from a different organization or a different kind of background could bring that you currently don't have. And I think that's really important.
I think you're absolutely right. It's the thing that irritates me the most whenever I see must-have experience of this sector or this environment or this role. And you're like, I do get that. Having moved between different sectors, there are times when you get there and you're like, have I just landed in outer space, in terms of kind of the shift that you've then ended up in. But it's a learning experience, You could bring in somebody who's got all of the tick box experience and sector knowledge and all that kind of stuff. They might not give you anything different, which is maybe what you wanted from bringing that person in. Well, actually, maybe you need to open your eyes, organisation, or for your team, and take that risk and be non-traditional as well in terms of approach to the careers that we create. And I think you're absolutely right. I think this skill set of how do I self-evaluate for myself right now is so valuable, because I think we're now living in a world where it is much more what's happening right now, what's happening in my near future, rather than what's the right decision I need to make now for in 20 years' time.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a huge amount of that in terms of that
Mm.
value piece
Yeah.
that is really useful both in terms of careers but also just generally in terms of your
Mm.
well-being and
Yes.
confidence levels and relationships. And if you have a stronger understanding of who you are and you have better clarity over your top skills and what you need to work on, then you are a much more well-rounded person in terms of what you can bring to any environment, you know. So yeah, definitely I think being more open about that, discussing that, I think it's why more organizations are embracing coaching now, you know, which I think is fantastic to kind of have those conversations. And like you said, the knowledge part of career change can always be improved, but the skills and behaviors that somebody can bring might be fantastic. But if they're lacking a bit of knowledge, you know, they don't have awareness of a certain type of policy or an industry update or kind of, you know, a challenge that's going on, you can tell them that, you can explain them, you can educate them on that. But if they tick all those boxes for skills and behaviors, then that's a winning employee for me. You know, that
It
if they fit the
is.
culture,
Yeah.
then you should be seriously considering them. You can always teach them the knowledge
You
later.
can teach the stuff, and actually, they might look at it and go, "Oh, have you realised X, Y, and Z?" And because you've been looking at the same thing for 15 years, actually, you hadn't noticed X, Y, and Z at
Yeah.
all, or thought about it in a certain way. And I think that willingness to create opportunities. I mean, maybe you didn't see this so much in the education environment. Maybe you did, so it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on it. But when we were looking at even in across organizations I worked with to try and move people between
Hmm.
different parts of the business or different roles within the business, even internally, could be incredibly difficult, incredibly
Hmm.
challenging. But the business areas that would be successful were the ones that were willing to take a punt on moving somebody who was a contact center manager to be an operations manager in the fields, and willing to make those changes. And that's so important for organizations and the experience they're creating for their people and their customers.
Yeah, and some schools are doing that, you know, and I
Mm.
think it's a really kind of forward-thinking approach
Yeah.
to leadership in lots of different ways, you know, because in school leadership you can become very niche in your approach. So you go down a pathway where, you know, you are running a subject, you know, so that therefore you're going to be the head of the department, so therefore you're going to be in charge of the academic side of the school, sort of thing. But then the next step up would be head teacher, and you've got no understanding of any other parts of the, you know, let's call it a business, because a lot of
Yeah.
schools are
Yeah.
businesses. They operate in the same way. You've got business managers, you've got marketing, you've got all that
Mm.
sort of stuff. And having that kind of rotational or kind of moving people around to different departments or work shadowing or whatever it happens to be, that is coming into education a lot more. And I think it is really healthy because you're developing their skill set, but linked to that, you're also developing a wider understanding of the organization, which means that you are better at your job as a result of that, because you know where your bit fits into the wider business, and how, when you're finished with a product or a program, where it goes next and what they need, and then you can work towards that. So yeah, definitely. And I think that helps career change because, you know,
Yes.
it normalizes the idea that you can work in different
Yeah.
environments.
Yeah. And I think that connection with kind of whether you look at it from a process perspective or a leadership perspective, where, I wasn't a subject matter expert in all the areas that I was technically the leader of.
Hmm.
But that's great. I loved that because it meant that I didn't actually have to be technically competent at some of it, you know? So that's where I think we can have real trouble, where people are kind of in that field of being the subject matter expert and then leading in that subject matter expert area, and they get lost in the technical stuff rather than actually, like you say, learning the broader stuff, which is about the business and about leading and about those skills.
Yeah.
That actually, if you can get to grips with that part, you can move anywhere.
Yeah. And that comes back to a huge topic of conversation, coaching versus mentoring, doesn't it? You
Yeah.
know, where
Yeah.
you really want to be helping your team to figure out the solutions. You want to coach them and sort of give them the skill set. You know, what have you tried? What could you try differently? You know, what's worked before? Getting them to sort of process it so they can develop that. If you're constantly saying, here's what you should do, here's my opinion, that has its place. Don't get me wrong, it has its place. But you're making a system where they are reliant on you. You are a key part of it, which makes it harder for you to career change because there's more emotional baggage there and there's more guilt about leaving and all those kind of things. And also your workload is higher because everyone's knocking on your door. Definitely. So it all links. It all links.
Is there anything that you think people should maybe consider before they make a final decision on changing career?
I think never be afraid to sort of change the environment that you're in to start with. There's no harm in trying to make the change that you want to see. So for me, I was in a position where I was a leader, but also I was looking at career change. Before I sort of jumped, I was very much trying to make those changes that would improve things like working conditions, culture, and I did a huge amount of work on that about improving the environment that I was working in, looking at kind of different processes and streamlining them and reducing workload. But for me, it wasn't quite enough to keep me.
Yeah.
But for other people listening to this, there might be things that you can do in order to make it more sustainable for you, whether you're going to stay in for another 5 years or whatever it happens to be, or maybe, those changes make it completely fine for you and you think, actually, the reason I was looking to leave is now solved.
Yeah.
But career change is a big deal. It can open lots of doors. It can be fantastic. It can completely transform your life. And in my experience, the grass can absolutely be greener. But before you go down that pathway, because it is quite full on, it's very, got a lot of emotional baggage to it.
Yeah.
And it's a big change in your life. Before you do that, think about what could change in your current environment before you kind of make those big steps. And you can do both alongside each other if you've got the time and the energy to look at career change and make those changes internally. That's fine as well. But it doesn't have to just be this whole, I'm a bit fed up, so therefore I'm out and I'm going to, walk away sort of thing. It can be like that if you've already tried to make those changes and you're ready to go. Great.
Yeah.
But do kind of give it some thought, I would say,
And because I've definitely seen that with people that I've, clients that I've worked with, that it almost looks like they've completely lost love with what they're doing. And sometimes you can get that back, but you need to take action and do something different, because if it's not going to change just because you want it to, like, something has to change for it to change. And you can give that a go first, and maybe you should give that a go first if the important stuff that's keeping you there, it's worth at least trying to see if the things can be fixed that are pushing you.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I think it's really important to see if that can be fixed. But if it can't, then what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. 100%.
You try something new, it either works brilliantly, it works a bit better, or you can go back, can't you?
Yeah, that's what I say all the time to clients is, if you ever get in a position where you're in a new role that you don't like, or you feel that this is not the right pathway for you, you can go back into teaching. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of vacancies because there's a bit of a recruitment and retention crisis in education, unfortunately. But it does mean you can always rely back on those skills and qualifications. You've still got them. You've still got all of that tremendous value that you can go back and deliver again, if that feels right to you at the time. But it all comes back to this central point we've been kind of jumping around, which is you control the narrative, you control the value. You're at the heart of those decisions. Don't let anyone else tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing for your career. Don't impose self-limiting beliefs on yourself. If you want to explore something, go for it. Don't write it off as an idea in your head before you've already done it. Career change isn't as simple as doing a quiz and figuring out, oh, I should be this now. It doesn't work like that. It's a long process. It's a building connection process, building relationships, talking to people, figuring out what jobs are out there, because the job market's changed so much. If you've been doing the same job for 5-10 years, there'll be jobs out there that you have no idea what that job is, and the only way you're going to find out is by talking to the person who does it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a process in a way, isn't there, to kind of considering that career change. So what would your top tips be then if somebody's thinking, oh, I might want to do something different? What would your tips be for approaching that?
So, all the things like LinkedIn and CV, they can all happen later. And that can be kind of final stages of the career change, really. But that's where people like to start, because people like to start with the practical things that they can sort of jump in. I'll update my CV and I'll start applying for stuff. I think actually the biggest things you can do are talking to people. One of the things I encourage my clients to do is simple activity, but just write down all the kind of the adults that you know, all your friends, family, and then write down their job title next to it. Where do they work? What do they do? For some people, you might not be able to answer that, and then you need to think, how close of a friend are they? But it is a really good starting point to thinking about what do other people do? How do they actually earn their money? What are those jobs that my circle are doing? And then the next time you see them, ask them questions about that. Take a deeper interest, about what they do and how they get into it, and what advice would they give about somebody trying to break into that environment. Start slowly from that. You don't need to tell them you're considering career change at all. You can just be genuinely curious about their working, and you just go from there. Once you've done that circle, there might be things from there that you think, actually, that sector was quite interesting. How can I take that forward? You might want to go back to that same person. Oh, I really enjoyed that conversation we had. I'd love to find out more. You just go down the rabbit hole, and that can go beyond your circle onto LinkedIn if you like, and you can start connecting people that you've never met before. You can go to events, you go to networking events, but you've got to be curious, because if you are genuinely thinking about moving from one career to the other, do your research. You need to think, does this tick the boxes that I want? Coming back to those two lists, the more of, the less of.
Yeah.
Because you might be jumping into an environment where that you want less of is even worse in that place. It might not be, but it might be.
Yes.
And there's only one way to find out if it is, which is having conversations with people before you jump into it. So there are lots of people who, consider teaching, for example. I would say before you consider teaching, have some conversations with some teachers. Now to come back, there'll be teachers who love it, and there'll be teachers maybe listening to this who go, I do love my job, and Mike doesn't represent me, and that's absolutely fine. I don't claim to represent all 600,000 teachers in the UK and all 24,000 schools, but there are a lot of people who are leaving the profession, and I represent them and what they're telling me. So, yeah.
I think that point around exploring careers, like, you can look at something and go, that looks amazing, and then go and do it, and it's like, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Sometimes the only way you're going to really know for yourself is once you start it. But with anything, if you don't do the research on it, how are you even going to begin to get into the right place around whether this is going to fulfill the things that you were wanting to move from? And that starts with having great conversations with people. And you might explore something that you've never even realised was there as a career option, especially if you've been in the same field most of your career. I think that's a really useful way of approaching it. Get curious about different careers and different routes or options that people might want to consider.
Yeah, and when people are sort of, you might be buying a car or buying a new house, you get obsessed with the details.
Yes.
Oh, I like those windows better than those. That one's got that type of sat nav, and I want this one. It's got leather seats, and I want this. You need to do that for career change.
I agree.
You need to really get into what it is and what it's going to look like, and what's it going to feel like, and is that better than this, or is this what I really want? Because if you're doing that for a car, then you should definitely be doing it for the place that you spend a huge amount of your time. Because that's going to have a much bigger effect on your well-being and your happiness and all those kind of things. So it's a difficult thing to do because we often don't, but it's a really important starting point.
Do the research, get curious, and then if it's the right thing for you, go for it. Believe in yourself and just give it everything you can. And if it's not the right thing, you can go back.
Yeah.
Or it might just be the next chapter of something incredible for you. And you've just got to believe in that then, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that feels like a really nice place to wrap up our conversation. Thank you so much. It was really lovely to have you on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about where our listeners and watchers can find you.
So the business name is Classroom Exit Coach. The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. My name's Mike Leaman, so you can just type that in, or you can type in Classroom Exit Coach. Also on Facebook and Instagram as well, and our website is just simply www.classroomexitcoach.co.uk.
Brilliant. And I'll make sure all those points of reference are in the show notes as well, so you'll be able to find Mike in there. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. A huge thank you to Mike for all that amazing insight. There was really brilliant tips and thoughts about how you might want to approach career change, whether that's for yourself or how you can support and facilitate that for other people. You'll find all the details for Mike in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me. My name's Anwen Bottois. I'm your host for this podcast, and I love to spend my time working with leaders so that they feel more confident and they are more effective, and that they hopefully love leading. Anyway, lovely to have you join us, and I hope that you join us on the next episode. Thank you.